Welcome to Life in the Pit, a podcast about the lives and adventures of instrumentalists within the wonderful world of musical theater. And now, here is your host, David Lane.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 66. It is great to be with you once again. I'm really looking forward to sharing my featured conversation today. But first of all, let me go ahead and just give a shout out to our sponsors, which is Fonz. Fonz is an online scheduling and billing assistant, which helps not only private music teachers, but also yoga instructors, martial art instructors, academic tutors, fitness coaches, and more. And what it mainly does is it helps you avoid all those countless emails for rescheduling and chasing payments and writing invoices and, dealing with spreadsheets and juggling multiple platforms. It takes hours of admin work and just turns it into a few taps of an app. If you go to the show notes today or our website, you can click on the link and that'll give you more information. It'll also give you a 14-day trial that has no credit card required, and see if this makes your life easier and helps you on the business side of things if you are a private instructor of any kind. Okay. Let's talk about today's guest. So, first of all, I should let you know why this episode is coming out a little earlier in the week than normal. Normally, I release these featured episodes on Friday. This is coming out on a Tuesday. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is because my computer, which I use for podcasting, is going to be tied up from tonight through the weekend because I use it with Mainstage. And that's going to be on my next show. Well, that next show is The Lightning Thief, and my guest today is Rob Rokicki, who is the composer and lyricist of The Lightning Thief. And I wanted to give, it's just selfishly, the cast members, crew members of the production I'm in a chance to hear this before we get into opening night, which is going to be this upcoming Thursday at Salem College at Elberson Fine Arts Center. So if you are local to Winston-Salem, come on by and check it out. You'll hear us talk about that production and a little bit more as we go on into this conversation. So for that reason, it's coming out a little bit early. But let me tell you a little bit about the guest, Rob Rokicki. Besides being the composer and lyricist of A Lightning Thief, he actually has had quite a career as an actor. He was in the 25th anniversary tour of Evita, and he also was in the national tour for Miss Saigon. This doesn't even get into his numerous regional credits. Besides The Lightning Thief, he also has two other albums out. He has I'm Ready, the songs of Rob Rokicki, and most recently Monster Songs, the world premiere recording. But the bulk of our conversation is about The Lightning Thief. And this is really fun because we not only get into the musical as a whole, but we go through it song by song. For rights reasons, you'll hear me playing on the piano some of the musical examples that we're talking about. But I would definitely, if you haven't heard the cast recording or you haven't heard it in a while, go check it out parallel to listening to this episode. And I think you'll get a lot out of hearing the music and hearing the composer and lyricist talk about the music. It's a lot of fun. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Rob Rokicki. It's my pleasure today to be talking to the composer, orchestrator, actor, and some, I guess we'll find out what all else you do, Rob Rokicki. So Rob, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
And I guess just, congratulations first. I understand you're an expectant father.
I am.
Yeah.
We were trying to keep it under wraps, but now it's at that point where we're about 4 weeks away.
Right.
It's not going to be under wraps much longer.
Right.
Very, very excited.
Well, that's fun. Oh, well, this is 2 weeks out, so I can cut out this part if you don't want me to.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I'm very happy, and I'm very excited for people to know we're going to have a baby.
Great. Rob, this is timely for me to be talking to you because I am the music director for The Lightning Thief, and I'm going to talk more about that specific production. as we go on, because I have some questions that some of the cast have relayed, and I've worked them in, and also a question from one of our pit musicians. So I thought that would be appropriate to bring on. But before we get to that, let's go back in time a little bit. How did you get into either music or theater? What's what is the 3 to 5 minute version of your pre-professional life?
I grew up with a lot of music in my household. My mom is a singer. My grandparents were singers, though not professionally. Though my grandmothers were, but not my mother. My father is a pianist, an excellent one, though again not his full-time profession. But we grew up with a lot of classical music and a love of that in my household, which is very ironic that I went into writing rock musicals. But I fell in love with theater at an early age as an actor. And then when I was in high school, I watched a friend of mine write a show that had like some musical elements in it that used all his friends. And I thought, oh, you can do that. You can write a play and people will come and see it, and you can put all your friends in it, and it's very much like the idea of the Muppets, just grabbing a group of folks and making things. And that was very appealing to me. And I won some playwriting competitions, and that gave me a little bit more confidence in my work. And I continued to write and act throughout college. And then when I moved to New York, and they were very much like, if I wasn't focusing on one, I was able to focus on another element of storytelling. I just kind of, not to feel pretentious at all, but I see myself as a storyteller just because I wear so many hats. It's the easiest moniker to just like wear, because I've worked as an orchestrator in casting, as a music director, as a lyricist, just as a composer. So yeah, I wear a lot of hats, and they all inform each other. And I love working in different media, and I've worked with many, many different collaborators in different capacities. And I think that has made me grow a lot as an artist. But yeah, that's the very short and sweet version.
Right.
But yeah, from a very, very early age, my parents loved musicals, and I've always had an affinity for storytelling and music, and the kind of cross-pollination of where they meet. It's really quite thrilling, all those disciplines coming together.
Right.
It's really fun.
So did you mention going to college? What did you study there?
Right. So in high school, I went to Interlochen, which is a kind of arts camp for musicians and actors, and I realized, that this is a place where young people can do this professionally, and I had my first kind of taste of that, and it was wild. Some of those people that were in those shows went on to be major Broadway stars or recording artists. Yeah, it's in Traverse City, Michigan.
I know someone who's a senior, or no, actually they graduated. They're freshmen in college now, but they just graduated there. So yeah. Yeah,
and I had no idea that you could audition for colleges while you're up there. And the University of Michigan came. The head of the program at the time, Brett Wagner, came to audition folks, and that's where I auditioned for college and got into Michigan, not knowing that it was one of the top musical theater departments in the country. Right. So I was very lucky, and I went there, and I was able to still write while I was at school, and I was a dual degree. I was an English major and musical theater, because all the things that pay the bills, an English degree and a musical theater degree. But I love immersive storytelling, and I focused a lot on Victorian literature, because that kind of world building is really exciting to me. And I structure songs a lot like essays. I actually love writing essays, so it was a good fit for me having those two degrees. I was also a bit of a crazy person, because I was just exhausted all the time, trying to finish it all in 4 years. But I'm very grateful that I was able to do that. And it gave me a bit of more perspective, because some of my favorite classes were outside of necessarily just taking tap and ballet and sing and all that kind of stuff. But then I continued my training when I went to New York, both in acting and in writing. I did the Lehman Engel BMI writing workshop for a couple of years when I moved to the city to kind of hone my craft as a writer, and then just kind of threw myself into trying to get stuff up. Learning by failing.
Well, I was also curious on the music side of things. 'Cause you mentioned before we started recording that one of the things you do is you're an orchestrator, and so one of the questions I was going to ask eventually is there's at least on the Concord publication copy we have of The Lightning Thief, there's no arranger or orchestrator credited. So I was wondering, is that you? Did you do the arranging?
There definitely should be an orchestration credit. It was Wiley DeWeese and myself. And I will make sure that is amended.
Unless I missed it. Let me just double check it. And it might be, I don't know if it's hidden somewhere. Wait a minute.
But we're definitely, but I am the co-orchestrator with a wonderful orchestrator named Wiley DeWeese, who's also an incredible music director. And he was our conductor and key one player on Broadway. And for the tour.
Oh, great! Yeah, so I'll have to. I'm looking. I don't see it. I think they might have missed that, or I'm just not seeing it.
I will let them know.
Okay, but so you're a co-orchestrator. So I mean, what I wanted to say was that the craftsmanship of your musical is very good, and it's a kind that I find usually comes with some kind of training, even if it's a one-on-one private education. So I was wondering what kind of. Are you completely self-taught, or have you gotten education from any kind of mentors along the way in music?
Well, in terms of composition, I feel like a lot of it had to do with my training in learning instruments. I learned piano since I was 5, and then I learned the guitar, and I've now spent most of quarantine becoming a better drummer. I'm still not a good one, but I'm getting better. I play several other instruments, not well, but several of them to kind of help with that. But I never had formal like contrapuntal writing. I never had to deal with species writing. I cared mostly about story and character, and so musical ideas would come out of that. But no, I feel like you do it enough, you start getting better at it. Right. So my inspiration came from a lot of different places, but I think also having a deep love of kind of a wide variety of music has helped inform that, and because I've been writing musicals since I was like 13, I've kind of gotten better at them over the last 20 something years. Right.
There's a figure in The Lightning Thief, just to use as an example. It happens in the day I got expelled, the prologue, and you'd use it I think at least 2 more times, but it's this little arpeggio figure in the piano. That's,
the Poseidon theme.
Yeah, it's like an A minor 7 in the upper voice and an A7 in the lower voice. You got a C versus a C sharp kind of conflict in there. And I was wondering, is that you or your co-orchestrator that came up with that specific chord?
Well, I wrote all the chords out, and I feel like that clash was very intentional. But then Wiley would help with. I did also a lot of the vocal arranging as well, and I just orchestrated and did most of the co-arranging vocally for a show with my friend Joe Iconis called Punk Rock Girl. I love kind of creating those kind of synthy vocal pad textures to help with that. But in terms of like chord shapes, sometimes Wiley would come up with some bluesy or interesting additions to a chord, but for the most part, they're what I intended, that we just figured out how to flesh in terms of voicing. I also worked with some wonderful musicians. I have a friend named Micah Burgess, who is an incredible jazz guitarist, and our guitarist on Lightning Thief, Kevin Wunderlich, is a beast. He is really, really fluent in a lot of different voice stylings and genres. So when I say this is the sound I'm going for, this is what I'm looking at, we could talk about filters. We talk about which pickup to use. We try to be specific in the score too about kind of how we differentiated with pickup to get the kind of overdrive sounds or whatever we need. But there's also motifs throughout the piece that, once you establish those, they're really great to then used for bigger payoff moments in Act 2. The Poseidon theme, the descending G kind of, it's kind of an augmented da-na-na-na. You have that kind of
yes
thing. And then Percy's mom song, Strong, Sally's song, has this melodic line. And you hear that at the end of like Son of Poseidon. Both of those you have the father's Poseidon Theme and his mother's song Strong kind of working together in conjunction at that last moment as Percy's coming into his own and like accepting who he is. So there's lots of wonderful little subtexty kinds of things you can do with that.
Nice.
In terms of like the chromaticism and all that kind of like spooky fun stuff that we had, that came a lot with that, out of necessity of like, how do we create more of a grand scale of like the cosmos and these Greek gods and myths, and listening to a lot of pieces like Gustav Holst's The Planets and being like, okay, how can we take that and put it on electric guitar, and what would that sound like in terms of voicings when you only have 5 players? You know, it was also like, how do we get some scale and scope out of it? So I think we have a lot of main stage sounds to try to help us. But
that specific chord I was asking about, the A minor 7, A7, I think that's the type of thing Gustav Holst might have used in Neptune with some of the voices, you know, so that kind of explains that. You sort of answered one of the questions that I had already. This is from our pit guitarist, was very interested about the guitar parts. Said that he could tell that The Lightning Thief was definitely written for the guitar. You know, it wasn't at the piano, you know, then taken to the guitar. It was written for the guitar, and it was very specific with the pedals and the voicings. And, you know, he's played a lot of shows. Sometimes they're very vague. And so
they just give you a PV and say, go for it. Good luck. Yeah. I feel like that was many of my first shows starting out, but I got better as I got better at guitar, and also just learning from really wonderful players, and always trying to figure out how to be better at it in terms of notation. Yeah, that makes me feel really good that they said that, because we worked really hard on that book. The other thing I will say is that nothing drives me crazier than a show that purports to be a rock musical or a guitar forward musical that sounds tepid or watered down or doesn't actually know how to create those sounds. Right. So the authenticity of that was really important to me. And I think also in terms of the angst of the show, we were, I wrote a lot of Percy's stuff in particular on electric guitar.
Right.
To get that kind of a lot of large intervallic moments too, of the kinds of like his outbursts, and, you know, a lot of fun, fast passages, because the character has ADHD and dyslexia and things like that. So how can the music mirror that? But it is a very guitar centric show, and that's why a lot of the songs are really led by the lead guitar. It is the kind of the voice of Percy in the show.
Right. So I feel like I got to get this out of the way, you know, having talked about the guitar, and also I felt really bad when I glanced at your website and saw that right up there you listed the things you do, and like the third thing is melodica enthusiast. Before I give you the bad news, let me set it up. When I was asked to music direct this for this upcoming production, it was a case of there wasn't that much money allocated for the pit, so it was going to be just piano and percussion. And I had a situation like this before, and I said, without even seeing the score or listening to the recording, I said, get a bassist too, because you've got to have that. And then as soon as I was able to see a copy of the score and just watch how the opening number begins, I was like, there's no way we're doing this without at least one guitarist. But that's where the money ran out. So it's like we weren't able to get both guitars. So it's the production, it's for a local school, and so it's missing that one part. But I hate that we left out the melodica, knowing that you're a melodica enthusiast. You know.
Well, it's one of my favorite instruments in the whole world. It is. Some folks think of it as a childish little classroom instrument, but I think you get a sound of harmonica and you get a sound of kind of a high reedy organ from it, and it creates a little bit of extra depth and vocal harmonies, and there's a real warmth to it, and there's a whimsy to it for the kind of comedy that we're doing in a song like Another Terrible Day. It's really funny and helps sell the comedy of it. Right. And it's a tricky book because it's a guitar two melodica too, and you know, again, it came down to money also with our show when it originally ran off Broadway and for the tour. We couldn't afford another key two book to have all the other bells and whistles we wanted. And they're like, if you could do one other double, what would you want? And had a lot of talk about like, would that be a string? You know, it's really hard to add just one read when you do that. It just feels weak, and it wouldn't be right for this show. I mean, like in a perfect world, I would love horns for like DOA, but I thought like, oh, a second guitar, so we can have a little bit of, one of my favorite bands is the Pixies, so like having an acoustic with the electric vibe is really wonderful, and I love that vibe. So we use that a lot, and then again, to fill out the texture, especially when you only have 7 actors playing 8 million things and they're all doing backup harmonies for each other, having some padding with the melodica, it just cuts so beautifully. It was really fun in songs like Drive. It also gives that kind of harmonica kind of vibe to it. I think it's a really versatile and wonderful instrument, and I love it very much.
Yeah, it does work well. I wish we could get that one extra part in. Since we are live in the pit, let's give a shout out to your pit. Let's name off your players in the original cast recording, and any
other
players that have contributed majorly over the years.
There were so many. I mean, we worked on the show for 7 years, but players on Broadway, Yuka Tadano, she's an incredible bass player. She's a beast. Wonderful player. Dennis Michael Keefe, he is a bass player that helped me come up with a lot of the riffs and licks. And also Eric Day, who is another bass player of ours, who's like I knew from college, who does a lot of pick rock playing. It was in a band in college that I would go see, and that helped kind of with the sound of the thing. He's in a Weezer cover band with our drummer for a while, Jeremy Yaddo, who is right now in American Utopia, is an amazing drummer. He plays on the deluxe album. Also, Jeff Fernandez was a drummer of ours, who's like Animal, just comes up with a lot of, I would come up with drum ideas, and then Jeff would take them and just elaborate and create really interesting fills. You would always know a day when someone else was subbing for Jeff, because you were just like, oh, I want the crazy fill.
Yeah.
Who else here?
Your guitarist. You have 2 guitarists.
Yeah. Kevin Wunderlich was our guitarist, our lead guitarist, and Kevin was with the show from the beginning. Kevin is an amazing guitarist and played in 2 separate bands that are really incredible. One is called Sky Pony. That's Kyle Jarrow's band that Kyle wrote the book to SpongeBob, and is in this punk pop band called Sky Pony, and also is in a heavy metal band called Couch Slut, and they are intense. Nice. And I saw one of their shows at St. Vitus, and it was so ear-splittingly insane. I was like, oh, this guy plays rock, when I asked who could play rock. Wiley DeWeese was our keyboard player. Andy Colopy was also a keyboard player that was wonderful. Micah Burgess was one of our subs, who was great on guitar. He covered both guitar books. One of my favorite guitar players in the world. Mike Rosengarten was our guitar 2 and melodica player, and we had him. He got better and better and better. We kept throwing more melodica tricks at him as we went. He just picked it all up. He also did a lot of helped us with some guitar programming for the latest show I work at. It's really great to have someone that understands all of that stuff. Kevin and Mike were able to kind of help program each of their books and to create different enough sounds so that the electric guitars had their own vibe to them. I'll also give a shout out to Ashley Bayer, who is my drum teacher, and she subbed a couple times in the show and made her Broadway debut. It was really awesome to get to work with a lot of these players that I've been working with for 15, 20 years and getting to have them, many of them make their Broadway debut. Playing in that pit. It was really fun. They were also on stage, so you get to see the band, which I really love.
Yeah, great. And did you serve as music director, or did you have a outside music director?
Oh, Wiley DeWeese was our music director and co-orchestrator. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Nice. His brain is like one of the smartest things. Does a lot of stuff with Michael Friedman, the late great Michael Friedman. Wiley is a really special orchestrator. He just did some new orchestrations for the Whisper House musical off Broadway, and they were phenomenal. What he can get out of just a single French horn, it's like mind blowing. He's so good. Love it. Nice.
So you did make me break down as a keyboardist. I've been one of those. I've been holding on to, I have a Core Chrome. You can probably see it in the case behind me, just kind of leaning up at the moment. I've relied on the onboard sounds for so long, but it's like the keyboard programming for this was very specific, and you even had the Logic Pro X sounds, for a lot of the things. So it's like, okay, we'll do main stage. So I've got someone programmed it for me, and it's good to go. It's got, but the keyboard should be full of everything you asked for. So
good. It's a show that I think the sounds are available enough all on Logic that you can program fairly easily on your own, because I get overwhelmed. I feel like as music directors, we now have to be like computer scientists as well, and we have to understand like
one I couldn't find that really is crucial to the sound of some of the underscores, but the programmer I used, he had something that sounds pretty good as a theremin. The theremin, so that was really, really neat.
I had to do a separate download box for that. I'm really jealous because my buddy Joe Iconis for Be More Chill, Charlie Rosen actually got a theremin for that score, but it's a much more like sci-fi show, and so you need a theremin, but like it's a temperamental instrument. We were like, oh man, we could buy a theremin, but we're like schlepping that thing on tour. It could break. It's too temperamental. We can use it so many things with main stage, especially like glockenspiel sounds, which are really important to me for the show. I think like the Glock reminds me a lot of Bruce Springsteen, and it represents optimism and hope for Percy. So I think it's really important that we had a good Glock sample sound and some organs. And we also use the arpeggiator at the end, which it shows my love of 1980s movies, because that's very much the Bring on the Monsters arpeggiator. Which is supposed to be slightly under what the tempo is, so you get a little cross, polyrhythm thingy going, which is kind of fun.
So before we get into, I want to go through just kind of song by song. We'll talk about some of the things. I want to go ahead and just mention a little bit about the production that I'm doing that'll be opening, if not the very day this comes out, a very weekend. And I did solicit some questions, from the group. It's a small group. So I am music directing this for the Salem College Purettes in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And the Purettes is, so first of all, Salem College is historically an all-female college, but it's one of those that is in the process of changing. But another thing that's also changing is the Purettes themselves, which is they've been a continuous organization since I think at least 1909 or somewhere around then. They've been around for a very long time. They're one of the oldest continuous drama clubs. Mm-hmm. They are not directly a part of Salem College. So it's not a Salem College theater program. It's a drama club. And you've got, students from with all sorts of majors. I'm pretty sure there's maybe one music major in the cast, and I'm not even sure about that. But they come from, all these parts of the college, and they come together just to, to put on a couple of productions a year. And they have their own budget, but they work kind of interdependently with the college, so that's kind of how that works. But in this case, this year, it's entirely student run. The director is one of the students as well. And I said that they, like the college, have been historically all female, but I know that they're working to become more inclusive because there are multiple people in the cast and the crew, that are have a female on their birth certificate, but they're transgender male, so that's kind of who we're working for, and we've been rehearsing, with a few breaks like spring break since late January, and they're doing a great job. But I asked, I have about, I think, 4 questions from them, and I'll see if I can kind of bring these out. One of them was, Annabeth has a line about feeling stoked, and the original person who played that role was Kristen Stokes, and we were just wondering, was that an intentional homage, or is that something?
You bet it was.
Yep.
You bet it was. Well, also, I'm like, I think that's so wonderful, and I love that it's so inclusive, and especially right now in the current climate, I think that's wonderful. And one of the things we're really proud of, and that we're at least trying to have with the way we put the show out, was The Lightning Thief just has 7 actors.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
One of those few shows that it's up to casting an and the director to decide. So I applaud them, and I think that's really wonderful. Yes, Kristen Stokes was with the show since like our very first like read through. So way back in like 2013 or 14. And I love her very much. And she's been Annabeth for so long. And I thought, oh, she's from Cali. She always is saying things like Stokes, and her last name is Stokes. Her mother runs a theater company. It's like theater in her bones. So yeah, that is for her.
So that line was given to her when she was in the show?
100%.
Nice. There's a couple of questions I think that are related. So one of them was, how did you find or become inspired by the Lightning Thief source material? What did you read the books, all of them, or just some of them? Or?
I read all the books, but we based it all on the first book. Again, this was a show that was commissioned for a wonderful company called TheaterWorks USA got the rights to, and then they actively reached out to different writers, and I submitted a demo from a suggestion by a friend, and I was a good fit with my demos, and that's how I got involved. But I hadn't read the books up until that point. So I read the book, I watched half the movie, and didn't watch the rest of it because the movie is not great.
Nice.
But we based it on the books, and that's especially the first book. But it was very helpful to read all of the Percy Jackson books, because you get some point of view from later characters, so then you can incorporate that into kind of how you build your other characters when you get to finally hear from Annabeth and Grover in later books. So,
right.
Yeah, it was all, and yeah.
And the second question, that's pretty much the same thing, but it was asking, it includes the question, there's the other series, Heroes of Olympus, and was wondering if you had any familiarity with those, if that made its way into the show at all.
Well, we only had the rights to the first book, and I mean, I would love to do more.
Right.
Joe Trace and Joe Trace is our book writer, an incredible champion of the piece, and he's the one that actually adapted it first as a play before we even made it into a musical. Joe and I pitched an idea for doing Heroes of Olympus, kind of cast album, concept album, because there's so many wonderful characters we don't get to include, like Nico, who's one of my favorites. I'm born on Halloween, so I, of course, love the really emo, angsty Half-Bloods. But yeah, there just wasn't time, and it also rights stuff gets in the way. But we were very grateful for what it's also like. It took us 7 years to write.
Right.
Lightning Thief. It might take that long to get into the other properties, but no, they were all wonderful, and I love Rick's world. I think it's a really irreverent and fun and heartfelt world, and I do love those books very much.
Right. The last question that was asked by them is, what is your favorite lyric or favorite musical song or moment from the show?
I've got a couple. It's hard because they're my babies.
Right.
But I think the toughest song to crack was Son Poseidon. I'm really proud of how that came together. I also really love the maybe my dad was this group too moment. It always chokes me up. I'm really proud of the key change, DOA.
Right.
That was hard. That was really hard. That song was just unwieldy. Some songs just are easy to come by. I'm a big fan of the time signature and key signature jumps in Good Kid. That came very organically. I think that's one of my favorite. And also the guitar panning was really, really fun. We tried to make that song feel as visceral about kind of a temper tantrum come to life that feels like something more by the end of it. And I think it kind of reveals a lot of Percy's character. But my favorite song is Grand Plan. That's the song that's the closest to my heart. I love that song very much.
Nice.
Lyrically, I think it's something I really like.
Nice. So for any listeners who, are listening to this about the process, if you haven't seen the show, we're trying to avoid any spoilers to the plots, or as if you haven't read the book or watched the movie or anything, but we'll avoid, spoilers on that. I just wrote down a few thoughts about the songs just along the way. Prologue / The Day I Got Expelled. Right off the bat, this is a guitar-driven show. I mean, I even told the guitarist, I said, I think it would probably be better if I wasn't playing on the keyboard than for you not to be playing on the guitar. It's that important of a show. So you have that guitar-driven right off the bat. we talked about that really cool arpeggio, the A minor 7, that in the upper voice, A7 in the lower voice. You also have what you call Wagnerian battle. I call it the Wagnerian battle theme. That's
the monster theme. Yeah, we use that for all the monsters in different forms or fashions. That was kind of that.
And then we get on to strong. You know, I didn't have any anything that stood out that I wanted to ask about. Is just more guitar driven.
Well, that was the first song I wrote for the show. It's the only song that stayed in all the versions of the show.
Nice, yeah. I'm arranging another musical, and it's funny. We were talking one time. I was talking with the writers, and there's like maybe 3 songs, you know, that are still in, from the original conception. You get a
always.
lot. Yeah. Are there bonus songs that you cut that you really didn't want to?
I feel like the songs that we ended up with are the songs that were meant for that production.
Right.
You know, in writing the thing, we tried a lot of different things, and other parts of the book that we adapted that were just a little too unwieldy.
Yeah.
In terms of the amount of what we're trying to get across. That being said, like I wanted a way to. I think I wrote about 27 different songs that were cut between the different versions over the many years, from a 1-hour version that expanded into the 2-act full version. And of those, I wanted a way of celebrating the Broadway cast, because it was one of those things where we were taking the tour and just moving it to Broadway. We really didn't have the opportunity or the resources to do a full Broadway cast recording. So I wasn't going to get a chance to hear any of the other arrangement ideas that we'd also done from off Broadway to Broadway. There's a lot of differences between those two that I don't think a lot of people know. But I was like, if I can at least redo the cast recording, at least I can do some of these cut songs that have been fan favorites or some of my favorites, and use the Broadway cast to get them involved. So that's how the deluxe album came about. I produced that. So it was really fun with Broadway Records to make that happen. And so the song Try, I think, like sums up those characters really well. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover. And so that was kind of like, it doesn't really fit with the rest of the show. It's a little too earnest. It's a little too radio pop, but I think I'm very proud of that song, and I think it speaks to that. It's like the one thing that I'm like, I wish there could be a way to fit that in the show, but I'm also like, it doesn't have a place. It just doesn't have a place. Right.
I've also, this was something else I heard from other writers. It's like, as you know, I was just kind of looking at the history, you know, I mean, this made it to Broadway in 2020, I believe, right? And it was
2019. We were the last show to open and close right before the end times. Yeah.
Right. But you had, you know, five years of like professional development before then. I'm sure you were working on it before then. But, you know, what the writers have said is the versions that they had at the time, they thought were so good, only to, you know, 1 or 2 years later being like, no, there's no way that should have been in the show. You know,
you know, I think we ended up with a really decent, you know, we had to adapt the version for whatever stage we were at with the piece.
Right.
So the 1 hour was the best that version could be. And for, you know, it was also like, there's so much world building and exposition. So like, how do you make that fun and entertaining? So like we decided, instead of having I think Their Sign was a much more grand kind of song, you know, in 6/4 it's supposed to sound a little like a centaur, you know, and all this stuff. And we're like, we need to get right into camp, and exposition is, I think, best delivered in moments of humor or panic.
Right.
Or like high stakes drama. So it was really fun to do kind of both of that with Another Terrible Day. And Percy's getting thrown all this information right at him in a very fun kind of show tuney way, which is very different from all the other songs in the show.
Right.
From a grumpy camp counselor. So like that kind of form dictates function for each version of the show, and the actors that we had. I mean, getting to work with George Salazar, he was such a great comedic actor. We were like, we got to give him a song. And what if we did something like this?
Right.
And that worked really well.
I know that you mentioned Their Sign. You know, the one thing I marked on about that is I really loved you kind of have a 2/3 polyrhythm in the keyboard. It's really nice.
That was, Wiley wanted to bring that out more in the orchestration, and I thought that was a really fun idea. He had some really smart ideas with that one.
Who's in Another Terrible Day? Who's the vocalist? Who's the actor in the cast recording?
So that's who I was talking about. Was a guy named George Salazar, and George is a brilliant comedic actor or dramatic actor too. He's just a wonderful, wonderful force of nature. It was like herding cats. That cast, They were just silly goofballs that made bold, beautiful, wonderful, wild choices. And our director, Stephen Brackett, he really creates an environment of play, a sense of play. And George would do that scene where he would kick this chair because he'd be so mad at the camp counselors. And one time the chair just flipped up and then landed right behind him, and it became a bit, and we just kept it. But it was so fun. He's just nice. He's so funny. But he plays Grover too. He does both parts.
There's a voice that he uses in Another Terrible Day. And this is me maybe reflecting my own youth or projecting. But it made me think of Dave Mustaine of Megadeth.
Oh, well, we were actually going for Lewis Black.
Oh, okay.
Kind of just angry over it. Yeah, that is funny. I love good old Megadeth. Yeah. Totally.
You've got a variety of music for the different songs in the show. I was just curious, Another Terrible Day, were there any specific things that influenced that song? Any music?
Well, he's an older character, so something that felt like, minor and chunky and a little kind of jazzy. I gravitate toward F as kind of a song to play kind of bluesy licks in. Yeah. So D minor felt right for him. You'll see there's a lot of other kind of brighter, happier keys for all the younger, more youthful characters, like A and G and E.
Right.
But for I find for older characters in particular, I start gravitating towards more flat keys or jazzier keys. And I think that's how I ended up in F and D minor.
Right. And put you in your place. The tempo is aggressive hair metal. And kind of 70s, 80s, a lot of open fourths. Were any specific bands you were thinking of, or just that style, that era?
I asked a wonderful guitarist named Ralph Agresta, who's I think his sister and his father are big. I think his sister is Bon Jovi's voice coach, and his father built guitars back in the day. But Ralph is an old kind of rocker, and we did a production of Hairspray. He was in the pit of mine, and I literally asked him. I think he wrote one of the So You Want to Play AC/DC books, for Guitar Center or something. And I said, all right, show me some basic riffs on this that feel right. And I think as a musical theater writer, we're always taught to try to make it as complicated and as interesting, and and at the end of the day, I find you're paying more attention to the craft of the writer than you are to the character. And I thought this is an angry rocker, and she's a bit more Pat Benatar than musical theater. So what would be that? So looking at a lot of AC/DC, and Sarah Beth Pfeiffer and I actually did a concert where we covered some AC/DC songs. So that was a big inspiration for just in terms of voicing and having fun and, using the minor third. And,
nice.
That's where that came from.
Campfire song. I just wrote sea chanty ? It's kind of a sea chanty feel to it. So.
Yeah, it's just a silly song. Joe Trace, the writer, came over, and we thought, what it would be really fun if they all just gripe about their parents. And now it's probably the song that is played the most from the show. But we wrote it in a night, just having fun, making up these silly limericks, kind of the lyrics that would go with it. But yeah, it's got that kind of rollicking drinking song vibe to it.
Right. Then the Oracle, I just put I love where the chorus sings fail. It's a nice big F9 chord in there. I think the Oracle, I wrote this down for a visit to Auntie M. I think that's where you have that real low bass line. It doubles, it's the bass and the keyboard doubling. That's that 4-note ostinato that's kind of creepy. It's pretty good.
You got to create some ominence somehow. And those are just shorthand to just do it quickly, down and dirty.
Right. You already mentioned what I wrote down about Good Kid. So Good Kid, I really love you have a 4/4 going to 3/4, and in 3/4 you have that syncopated rhythm that kind of unexpected the first time you hear it, but it really drives it forward at that point. So.
Yeah, and it sounds like he's having that temper tantrum when he's stomping. We also like have it the muddy. We're playing fifths in the bass, so you get that kind of 90s grungy, chunky in the bass sound of those fifths, which I like.
Right. Killer Quest. I was wondering if there was any specific influences for that song musically.
No, that was one of the first songs I made for the original demo that's just changed a lot over the years. But I think it was like, I wrote it in an attempt to doing some kind of fun and upbeat of like, all right, there's danger. How do I, what's that going to feel like? So it was another like kind of guitar driven. I like writing in E with open strings. So I did that on Drive too, they're kind of companion songs. It's the continuation of Killer Quest. So a lot of like open voicings when you're, suspension chords and stuff like that, which is really fun.
And dramatically, it's funny because it's a nice serious song, but you have these comic interruptions, when they meet certain people and
right. I think like the earnest version of that is Try, and it feels a little too earnest. I think like having Killer Quest where it's like, it's the snark that gets them through, even though the stakes are real, which I think fits tonally really better with the books.
Right. Let's see. Lost was in. Let's see. What are we talking about? Lost. I just said it just seems like that might have grown out of Another Terrible Day in a way, a little bit.
No, not really. No, Lost was its own thing. I mean, like it came organically, very similar to Another Terrible Day, where I took a scene that Joe had written and then kind of cannibalized it, for lack of a better word, to just kind of take it and use the rhythm that he had in the words itself. And they're like, oh, there are three kids having a panic attack. How would Stephen Sondheim write an episode of Scooby-Doo? What would that sound like? Right. With just like we put it on maybe a harpsichord, we have like a lot of patter, put it in dark and spooky minor stuff, but like a lot of overlapping voices and a lot of counterpointing kind of moments, and that's where that kind of came out of.
And as you said, you really love the song. Annabeth's song is My Grand Plan. Mm-hmm. And so was that one of your early songs, or did that come later?
No, that came later, and it didn't quite have a place, because unlike most of the songs in the show, I wrote them based on the scene and what needed to happen. But both Good Kid and Grand Plan were songs that, my writing partner was off working on another project, and I was like, I really want to have these moments for these characters. I really think I have an idea of like a kind of I Am song or I Want song that would fit later in their journeys. And Good Kid, we found a perfect place for it to go, and I knew where that one would be, and I just kind of wrote it independently of anyone else. I just said, this is where this song is going, and I wrote the song. A very similar thing happened in Grand Plan. We didn't have a good place for it because we were still trying to figure out Act 2. So the song got cut, and I rewrote a different song in its place, and it just wasn't working. And I thought, this song needs to be here. We tried a bunch of different ways to have it fit, and I think we settled on one that makes the most sense. But it was tricky. The why it sounds like it sounds at the beginning with the Rhodes, it was very much like, if Percy's going to be the electric guitar with these big intervallic things, I wanted Annabeth to feel more notey and intellectual, and this kind of Rhodes computer-like sound. That's why I went with that. And it doesn't really start getting more angsty until the bridge, where it kind of fits its groove. So a lot of like Regina Spektor, Ben Folds, that kind of stuff was influenced on that song.
Nice. You got two great tempo marks in Drive. So the first one is Eastbound and Down, y'all. And then as it goes forward, develops Go Full Mumford. So Mumford and Sons, I'm assuming. So.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not a huge lover of all that indie folk stuff at the beginning of the early aughts, but I did love a lot of that, that kind of fun reference, and they do what they do very, very well. I love Smokey and the Bandits, so that was the beginning of that is clearly an homage to like, we got a long way to go and someplace to get there. It was a big. That and Moving Right Along, the Muppet song from the Muppet movie, as well as some of the Mumford and Sons stuff with we have like banjo doubled in the score, but in the keyboard track. But man, I would love a real banjo. I think it'd be really fun. Yeah.
On Tree in the Hill, you got a section there for Smashing Pumpkins sections. I think you it's listed on there. That's what it is, and it's the song Disarm.
100%.
You've got the tubular bells and everything in the keyboard part, and I was because it was when I was in college when that song came out, and the cast members who are currently in college, like they were born way after the fact. I thought I was going to be explaining them a song they didn't know, but they all at least acted like they've heard the song and they knew it. So I don't. Wow. So I was kind of impressed with that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit of like we tried the song originally. It was all on a acoustic guitar, and then it wasn't reading very well. And then we tried it on electric, and it with kind of a more kind of country twang to it. Almost felt like kind of a Ryan Adams-y murder ballady kind of too. We just liked that better. But yeah, that's the bridges. I have a strong affinity for late '90s, early 2000s. There's a lot of like My Chemical Romance and Paramore, but also like again like Bruce Springsteen and some classic rock elements that are thrown in.
Right. On a side note, if you never have seen it before, any of the listeners out there, Smashing Pumpkins, the song Disarm, it's one of the great music videos.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic video.
It's like everyone's kind of just like floating in the air, and it's like weird angles, and you get to see the cellist and everybody playing their instrument. Yeah. No flying tubular bells, though.
No,
that would have been pretty cool.
Dangerous.
Another great tempo mark for Elevator, which is terrible elevator jazz music.
We wanted something that was like the lobby of the underworld is your waiting area in a music studio, and what would they be playing that would just be awful? So we came up with something kind of Girlfriend Ipanema-esque.
Right. Now you got the one that challenges the cast, but I think this might be my favorite. It has my favorite section of the show, and that's DOA. My favorite section is when you get to you label it as club groove, and the ensemble's doing the DOA. It's like I thought musically that's my favorite spot. But this is where you've got cameos from Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, James Brown, Mozart, and even the Vienna Boys Choir. So all in different styles, So
that was proposed to me by Barbara Pasternak, the artistic director of TheaterWorks. She said, "I really want a big hell sequence or underworld sequence." And I was like, they've done it. It's called the Spooky Mormon Hell Dream. I can't do anything better than that from the Book of Mormon. Right. And she said, no, I really think there should be more stakes. And we originally had it as part of one larger montage sequence, and we were like, no, it needs to have its own feel. And we had this incredible actor named Carrie Compare, and she was just so funny and dynamic. And hell is supposed to be this record, or Underworld's supposed to be this record company. How fun would it be to play with all these different genres? But I needed something to glue it all together, and that's where that kind of soul inspired funky groove came from, which was actually from a cut song, that that groove, which is really fun when you can slap it on the bass. It sounds really fun. But that kind of unified all of that together.
I am looking forward to getting the guitarist, because I got to say the playing the rehearsal accompanist for this show, that's a very difficult thing at the beginning of DOA, that guitar style.
Oh right, the little riff, the little James Brown riff.
Even if I play the right notes, it just doesn't sound right.
It's that kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan little licky stuff up by the high. It doesn't work on piano.
No. And then I got on my notes, I just ran out of paper. After some underscores, you have what I call the home stretch. You got Son of Poseidon, The Last Day of Summer, and Bring on the Monsters. I can tell you by the reactions, the cast loves Bring on the Monsters. It's like they really get into that, and they're loving the whole show, but especially that song. And any thoughts just on those last three songs that we haven't shared already?
Like I said, Son of Poseidon was kind of a tough nut to crack as we're trying to figure out a large sequence. So I'm kind of happy how that all came around. The through lines and other motifs that kind of pay off with Put You in Your Place and Strong, and the Poseidon theme all kind of working their way together of this kind of parents and children thing that worked out for them. The Last Day of Summer was just was a longer sequence that we made a little more streamlined, but it has one of my favorite moments in the show, which is Luke's Good Kid reprise. Which if we've done our jobs right, then the audience really leans in and is really invested in Luke's character, because he's such a good foil for Percy, of this kid that's been kind of wronged by the world and his parents, and he just kind of he lashes out, and you can see that Percy could have easily gone down that path. And I think using the good kid motif in a much more darker, destructive way, it has some really good payoff there. So that was really fun. But it's just back and forth on two chords. The beginning of that song, that whole thing is just a Green Day song for the most part.
I like musically how you get to that reveal, and I gotta say that in my opinion, the character's more sympathetic than in the book, because I'd never read the book until I started doing the show, and because I wanted to get that in my head before going started, and I just thought I really like it in the show. So
well, if you get to the last book, which I hope you do, because they're a really wonderful series, Luke does have some moments of redemption, and we wanted to like pepper a little of that in, even though we're only dealing with the first book. We really wanted to have some moment where you really feel for this guy and why he's doing what he's doing. I think that's what makes the best villains, are the ones that you understand why they do what they do, their motives.
Right.
And then Bring on the Monsters, that came out, that was 11 o'clock kind of last second. I had to figure out how to end the show. We had a different ending of like the last day of summer that we used to wrap up the show with, and it just felt a little too pat. Felt a little too calm, and we were in the middle of an election. Of certain people back in the day in 2017 that I was just kind of thinking a lot about, like, if this show goes on, what do we want to leave young people with this message of, like, hey, our parents may not have our best interest for us, our leaders may not have our best interest for us. You have to go out and try to make the change you want to see, literally, this kind of idea. There is something about Empire Strikes Back that always is, it's why it's my favorite Star Wars movie. It's, all your heroes are kind of scattered. You don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to try to persevere through all of this, but there is no ending. It's like, well, we got through this battle, and then the war ain't over. So I kind of wanted to leave that sense of like, amping each other up for the next fight.
Right.
And that's kind of what that song came from. And I was really glad that we got to share that message of like, you can do this. I see you, I got you, but we're going to have to do it on our own.
Right. That dramatic sentiment of not having an ending, is that why you made the choice you did for how it musically ends? Basically everything disappears but a solo guitar and Percy for the last two measures,
Yeah. Well, I wanted the guitar lick that starts the show with "I didn't want to be a half-blood" to be the way that Percy ends, which is the first lyric in the show of Percy's, and it's the first line in the book. Mm-hmm. So it was important that the first line of the book be the last line of the book, but like, see how far he's come. He didn't want to be, but he owns it now. And so that's why that lick is there by himself.
Nice. Well, thank you for going down the rabbit hole of a deep dive into, song by song. And we're looking forward to presenting this, again, as this comes out, we'll be on opening night.
I'm so excited for them. Oh, wow.
So what other projects do you have going on at the moment?
Well, I just closed a run of the show called Punk Rock Girl that I wrote with Joy Conness, directed by a wonderful Jen Werner Canizaro, who's a fabulous choreographer, a director, and it's a jukebox musical, but it's all female fronted punk or pop songs from the past like 25 years. We get some Pat Benatar, we get some Pink, we get some Avril Lavigne, we had Slater Kinney and Bikini Kill, and some like really fun. We had some Hole, some Courtney Love, so it was really fun to get to orchestrate that. So that's getting licensed by Concord. I'm excited about. I'm working on a piece called Experience Marianas, which is about a woman trying to leave an oceanic cult. It takes place on a ship, and we just did a workshop of that in the UK when I collaborated with that with my friend Sarah Beth Pfeiffer. It's kind of about groupthink and patriarchy and all those kinds of things, but it's really funny and upsetting at the same time, kind of like a Candor and Ebb musical is kind of how I see it. Something taking a really serious subject matter like cults, but making something really funny and entertaining out of it. It's fun until it's not.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm working on that. I'm working on a show called Monster Songs that with another director, Jen Thompson that we're developing at TheaterWorks Hartford and trying to do an immersive musical out of, to take the audience on a journey of these monster archetypes. And I have an album for that. I'm going to release a new single for that in a couple of weeks, which I'm excited about. So lots of irons in the fire.
Well, besides buying tickets for your shows and downloading or buying some albums of yours, where can people follow you or find out more about what you're doing?
You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Rokicks. So that's R and then Rokicks.
Nice.
And or on my website, robertrokicki.com.
Great. Well, best wishes as will this be your first child coming up?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so best wishes as you begin fatherhood, your next adventure. And thank you so much for taking time to chat with me today.
Of course. Thanks. It was a pleasure. Have a great run.
Thank you. And that wraps up my conversation with Rob Rokicki and episode number 66. And if you've made it this far and you're just waiting to correct me with a comment, I want to go ahead and correct myself. I talked multiple times about an A minor 7 over an A7 chord, and it is actually an F major 7 over an A7 chord because I misread an F as a G, and I'm glad that I noticed that so that I'm now playing it correctly for this upcoming run. So this upcoming run, if you are local to Winston-Salem, it is at Salem College. It is at Elberson's Fine Arts Center, and it is going to be showing Thursday the 24th, the Friday the 26th, and Saturday the 26th, all at 7 p.m. shows. There's also a 2 p.m. matinee on the 26th, and I believe you can buy tickets at the door, or you can go to Salem College. You can find Salem College Pierettes, I know, on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm sure that they have a link to that and a number that you can call if you want to buy the tickets in advance. We are asking the audiences to wear masks. The cast and the pit and the crew will be in masks. Well, that is all for now. I am working on recording the next couple of episodes. The schedule might be a little weird as to when I get them out, but some great guests coming up, so definitely check those out when they are available. As a reminder, if you want to follow what's coming up next, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Life in the Pit Pod. You can follow me on Instagram at David Lane Music or on Twitter or Facebook at David M. Lane Music. As always, a special thank you to Mark Perollo for the cover art and to Bill Cisna for providing the introduction to this podcast. The theme music is composed and performed by David Lane. You can find out more about this podcast, leave feedback, or a donation at lifeinthepitpod.com. Please rate and review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts, and please share with your friends. Thank you for listening.